2. Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. We're getting on a big old jet plane and going about as far as we can go in this league, not called London. I prefer Seattle, and I'm even taking my passport with me. Who knows what can happen in BC? He is Steve Raible. He has joined us many, many times over the years talking football and certainly talking even some Mariners back in the day. We don't get together with the Seattle guys and talk baseball enough, Steve, so we'll keep the Seahawks here even on a Huskies weekend when the Who are playing the baseball stadium. I'm delighted to be coming out there, man, but more than that, this is a really good football game. This is a game of the week kind of game, and there's a lot of heat on this, and I think we're all excited for what kind of football game it's going to be.
Well, as we are, Nestor. I mean, we're really interested to see. The Seahawks have proven that, A, they can win games. They've proven they can come from behind and win games. They've proven that they can beat teams with losing records. Now is the next step. Can you get a faster start? Can you control a quarterback that is, as far as the whole package and running the football, as good as anybody out there? I don't think he throws the ball as well as our guy does, and have an ability to run the ball too. But Lamar Jackson is really a special athlete. But just all those things, we just need to see our team continue to advance. Our defense still isn't playing up to where I think Pete Carroll and Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright, the two linebackers for us who are the veterans, believe they should be. But all that said, we got a lot of young guys. We're the fourth youngest roster in the league, and these young guys are learning, if nothing else, they're learning how to hang in there and make a play when one is needed and win a close game down the stretch.
Well, the numbers are almost gaudy, right, for Russell Wilson and where he is. And, from all of us who are away from it a lot, he came in here, cleaned our clocks 4 years ago, and, the memories are long. But the last time I was in Seattle, he wasn't there. I mean, that's how crazy it was. Last time was Tavares Jackson, and, we were finding our Super Bowl form, and you guys were finding your franchise at that point. And Russell Wilson comes in and has been amazing. But more than that, we don't see much of him, on the East Coast, West Coast, Monday night games, Sunday night games, whether, if you're a fantasy person, you certainly know about all of that. But seeing him and seeing now that we're trying to be him to some degree, right? So's Houston, so's the whole RPO thing that maybe Pete Carroll was a little ahead of his time in everything they've done, but it's very, very hard to replicate what Russell Wilson's done given his size and stature over the last 7-8 years in this league.
Yeah, and actually I think, Nestor, Russell was the one that maybe pushed Pete into the advancing of his theory of run the football, play strong defense and special teams. That's been, a Pete Carroll key mark in how he coaches for his entire time. And Russell, because of his skill set, was the one I think that made that opportunity become real for him. I think there's a lot of interesting things about Russell, and I'm telling you, I can say, yeah, I know Russell, and a lot of people in this town who get a chance to work with him, they do know him, but you don't know, and certainly I don't, how he is able to do all the things that he does. He's considered right now, he's probably the front runner for MVP in the league. He's one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the National Football League. He is an amazing community member, goes to Seattle Children's Hospital every single week without fail on his day off. Takes Sierra with him and posts about it every week on his Twitter account. He is involved in other businesses. He's now a part owner of the Sounders. He was at the Yankees playoff game last weekend. He's just a remarkable person, the way he can keep so many balls up in the air at the same time. All that said, he is the quintessential pro when it comes to preparing for understanding what the other team is going to try to do to you and what you can do, in fact, to them, and also getting the young guys to understand what it takes to win. He's been just remarkable. I don't know that I've ever known a person, let alone a football player, quite like him.
Steve Raible joining us here, long time, and not first time around here, certainly. Evening news anchor at KIRO 7 in Seattle and play-by-play announcer on the Seahawks radio network and football play, all that stuff for you. This is sort of the glory after, math of winning and having the success. And I talk about that triangle all the time of a general manager, a coach, and a quarterback, right? And for a long time was Ozzie Newsome here with Brian Billick, and then after that, John Harbaugh and Joe Flacco. Now we've had Eric DeCosta. We feel like we're going into something here with Lamar Jackson, that you can win this way for a period of time, specifically if you get the defense to play better. That's another issue for us on Sunday. But for where the organization is, Steve, I've been coming in, and you were around there a long time ago in the era of Jim Zorn and just trying to figure out who Rupert Jones was and who Jim Zorn was and where the Kingdome was located and all that stuff to see how mature the sports teams can become. But I remember coming when it was a Mariners town, right? And back with A-Rod and the Kid and Buhner and Edgar Martinez and Randy Johnson, and I know you've been there for all this, but it's such a sea of action green now when you come in there. And to have the team off to this kind of start, we're feeling a little bit here where the purple flamingos come back on the lawn a little bit when you've won, and it sort of awakens things. And this is sort of an awakened game for the Ravens with a bye. We have Tom Brady coming here. Our next home game's Tom Brady. Tickets are $200. It's like a big game in a way we haven't had one here in a number of years. But this will take the temperature on that. And I think this is a big game for you guys at 5-1. You haven't had a lot of 5-1 games there lately, right?
No, we have not. And that's not to say we haven't finished the season well. In fact, that's what makes everybody here, I think, so excited, is that we understand how Pete has always said it's not how you start, it's how you finish. He is always pushing toward finishing stronger at the end of the season when, a lot of teams are kind of beat down a little bit. You have the injuries have started to build up through the course of the year. Guys aren't playing quite as fast, and you're playing maybe with some young guys that you didn't think you were going to have to play with because some of the older guys are just too beat up. All that said, one of the things that Pete has again talked about all the time is that you can't win it in the first quarter or the second or even the third, but in the fourth quarter you can. Russell has been the guy who has believed that. Bobby Wagner, KJ Wright, they bring that feeling along from the Super Bowl team. We don't have many of those guys left. We won the Super Bowl in February of 2014. That's not all that long ago.
By the way, that was after us, right? So we were the year before, exactly. And I'm looking around, and I'm like, well, there's Tucker, and there's Sam, and,
Right. There's just not many of those guys left, and that gives you a sense for how tenuous this business is. And I think that, this is the time for the Seahawks. Again, we had one little dip, but we've basically been that playoff team, at least into the first round and maybe the second round of the playoffs, since our 2 Super Bowls back-to-back. That was with the Legion of Boom. That was with a defense that was such a difference maker that it was as good a defense as there ever was in our Super Bowl championship year. We're not doing it so much with defense right now. We're doing it because we've scored more than, 20 points, more than 25 points, in fact, for the last several weeks. Defense, we're giving up more yards and points than we should be. All that said, if you can win games on offense, when your defense finally starts to come around, now you've really got something.
Steve Raible has been doing this a long time out in Seattle, and I tell you what, for you with Russell Wilson and the star power, I've talked to some folks this week about Ichiro. I mean, you go back to Bruce Bhakti for crying out loud, right? And and all the people that have played there. Russell's starting to transcend all of that at this point, and there's always sort of him getting off the bus and never being 6'5", right? That is even as a football player for you that. You said he changed Pete's mind about how things were going to work and how offenses are going to work, but it has begat this whole thing with Lamar Jackson where I don't want to say you don't feel that way with him getting off the bus. You don't feel that way about Hollywood Brown, who looks tiny, as a receiver, but this is a different era and a different type of way. They're drafting players and really maybe bringing the college game more into the strengths of the college game into the pro game, and on a week-by-week basis. When they drafted Lamar a year and a half ago, they thought, hey, this is going to be an extra meeting week. This is going to be trouble for other teams. Yet Pete's run this thing for a long time, and I know the defense has been through some transition. This would be the kind of place where you go and you say, we know how to take care of Lamar. We take care of it practice a lot, right?
Yeah, and it also takes that special person, as you know, because there were a lot of quarterbacks who would come in here and say, okay, we're going to run the ball 65% of the time, and they'll look at you and say, what are you, nuts? I can't get my numbers, which means I can't get a second or third contract if I'm not getting big numbers. Russell Wilson, all he wants to do is win. And when you go 23 of 29, that's like a half for an Aaron Rodgers or, some of these other guys, Mahomes, who throws the ball 60 times a game. That's not much. But when you're as efficient as Russ is, when you've thrown, 14 touchdowns this season and not an interception, and your quarterback rating is up around 124, something like that for the season, just completely unheard of numbers right now. And the biggest number is, or two numbers, 5 and 1. And that 1, the loss to the Saints, we would argue that was, that was on the defense. That's not on the offense. He has just really changed the way the game is here, and been happy with the opportunity to do whatever it takes, run, pass, give the ball to his playmakers, do something that allows his team to win, and the fans know it. The fans see it. And now when, the game starts a little slowly and maybe we fall behind by 7 or 10 points, yeah, there's a smattering of people that are a little bit uneasy, but they know when 3 walks on the field, there is the chance to win that football game regardless of where you are and how many points you're down. And that's a pretty remarkable thing.
Steve Raible joining us here. You can find him at Raible KIRO 7 out in Seattle, hosting the news, doing the sports, calling the games, and watching the Seahawks era. I was thinking about this with Lamar, and I talk about this a lot, about the bumper car offense we saw last year. He's forced into this thing. Flacco's out, never to be heard from again. Next time he pops up is in Denver. And they're running this bumper car offense last year, and they were always in 2nd and 2, 2nd and 3. And he was running in the linebackers. And then most of the offseason it was, hey, don't do that. Let's throw. Last weekend they got back into, hey, let's run the ball 19 times with Lamar. Just as a guy who's watched this a long time, I argued against it for long stretches last year. You hold your eyes. You look between the sheets when you're watching. Like, don't get up. Please get up. Take the sideline this time. Sometimes they get it. Sometimes you don't feel it. But with young football players, they always feel like there's a seam. We've seen Lamar do things, and I know Russell Wilson's done things that you say, I've never seen anybody else do that. It's like playground stuff where they stop on a dime, stuff that Barry Sanders was doing,
Yeah, and the one thing I would say about, Lamar doing what he's doing right now, and in a sense reverting back to that bumper car thing, reverting back to that, hey, let's run it 19 or 20 times with the quarterback. Let's do the run pass option and see where it takes us. One of the things that we learned here is that even though Russell is not 6'5", he's 5, quite frankly, a shade under 5'11", but he is well put together. He's like a 220, 225 pounds. He is strong and solid, and he can take a shot. But we cringe every time he runs the ball and doesn't slide down. And he did it a couple of times against Cleveland. He knew he had to make a couple of extra yards, and so he really ran hard to get there, and about got his head taken off one time. And everybody in the booth, and I'm sure everybody on the sideline says, whoa, Russ, you just got to be careful about this. And that's what I see with Lamar. He's a big, rangy kid. He's got a lot of leg that people can hit and take out from underneath him. And you get 1 or 2 injuries, ask the other kid on your roster, ask Griffin, what that's like and how it will end your career or at least shorten it in a heartbeat. Those are the things that make you nervous about these guys that are such great athletes. At some point, they have to learn, and this is what Russell has done, how to go through his progression, 2 and 3 reads, how to move in the pocket and allow his receivers to help him out, and then get rid of the football so you don't take the shots.
Man, you're talking to a guy to watch Burt Jones play back in your era, and you talk about Burt Jones, that hit on Burt Jones altered the course of the franchise here. You know what I mean? And I know you know that as well, having come in here and played, very early in your career as well, that, it changes everything. Certainly for the Redskins. They haven't been the same without RG3, and we feel that way, but There is a thought that he throws the ball better than anybody thought he was going to throw the ball. They have more weapons, but the way the team is constructed, it does feel like they're going to be running him more than we're comfortable. And the game's built differently now. I mean, he dirted the ball last week, just threw it into empty space out of the pocket. It felt like last year that didn't feel like an option. It always felt like, I'm going to put my head down and run. I think he certainly has been coached and coached well. He's getting the coaching, and we're seeing that,
Yeah, and he's he's obviously he's a terrific athlete. I'm sure he's a smart kid, and he'll pick that stuff up, but B, he will take it to heart. And it won't take too many of those tough shots to the sternum or the shots at knee height to get you to understand that this is what you have to do to protect yourself. And also, even if you're a guy who is so competitive and you believe in your heart that you can make these plays every time, you also have to consider the fact that you are the leader of that offensive team, the team in general. They're depending on you to stay healthy for 16 games. So you also have to understand what that responsibility is all about, too. You're playing not just for you to make plays. You're playing for your entire team. Yeah, you guys want to win, but you also need to be there next week and the week after and the week after to help them win. So, it's funny, Nestor, you made me think when we were talking about these quarterbacks. I remember back to Jim, who was my quarterback, Jim Zorn. And Jim was known as the latest coming of Fran Tarkington. Both of them left-handed, but more specifically, both of them scramblers. Not necessarily downfield runners, but the ability to scramble, get out of the pocket, make something happen on the move. Jim was as good a thrower on the move as I've seen over the years. And he, for the most part, knew how to get the ball out of his hands, protect himself, so he wasn't the one taking shots and giving his playmakers a chance, like Steve Largent and Sherman Smith and Sam McCullum, opportunities to make plays with the ball. It's a learned skill, and young guys, they got to learn it.
Steve Raible joining us here. Raible KIRO, KIRO 7, the evening news anchor and football player, broadcaster, all that good stuff. All right, let's get to some the rest of the team. And what are we finding during what I'm sure there is Earl Thomas homecoming week, right? You're finding Earl Thomas in a purple helmet, right?
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. I got to know Earl a little bit, as we all do when you cover a team, and Earl played as long as he did here and played so well, and he could not have been, a nicer, more giving kind of guy when it comes to sitting down and talking about the team and talking about family and where he came from and how he's built so far as what are his beliefs. He was a remarkably intense young man, and I'm assuming that that's still the case. But there's nobody that wants to beat him more than his former team. And, we know exactly how he plays, know his tendencies, know what he likes to do. Then again, he knows what we do. He knows Russ. He knows our schemes. He understands how to play against his former team. So, I'm hoping that the bad blood's not there. I don't think there will be bad blood there on the part of, in fact, I'm sure of it, on the part of Pete or John or former teammates. I hope that he'll at least come and hug up some of his teammates, and I expect he will, and just say hi to the people that he knows in the organization, and then let's just go out there and play football and leave it on the field.
For you with the Ravens and knowing a little bit about them, you saw Cleveland last week. You've seen some similar opponents as well. We got our clocks cleaned by Cleveland. It felt like they see purple and that's blood for them. They haven't played well against the rest of the league. Meanwhile, Miami, Arizona, Cincinnati. I mean, this would be a signature win, for the Ravens to go out and beat Seattle. And someone asked me, I think it was Wyman, somebody earlier in the week said, hey, what do y'all think of Russell Wilson? Do people talk about him? I'm like, well, we're sort of in the land of Tom Brady and Ben Roethlisberger and, the things that we talk about around here in the middle of Philadelphia, Washington, all the things that happen on the East Coast, Eli Manning and all that. But I don't want to get on a plane and go see Russell Wilson ever. Not in Seattle. I know enough. I know enough to know we don't want to see him this week. And then you see the kind of year he's having. But for the Ravens, this is a really big football game and a win year. We got Tom Brady on the other side. This is a really weird time for us because there is no Pittsburgh anymore, right? Cincinnati's not coming. Cleveland looks a little impotent. This might be a rare year when a 10-6 can pull a division win for us in a year that felt like rebuilding because you're not getting Flacco, Suggs, Weddle, Mosley. They're not coming off the bus.
Yeah, and that's a good thing for us. And I know how hard it is to win games on the road. I was telling somebody, we were having dinner on Saturday night in Cleveland, and was mentioning to somebody that I remember going back there and playing in the old Cleveland Municipal Stadium there back in 1979, and we were the underdogs coming in, and we were having a pretty good season, too. We ended up going 9-7 that year and almost making the playoffs. I caught a long pass, and one of our backup running backs took it in a couple plays later from 5 yards out, and we win that game. I remembered how tough the fans were on all of us who were dressed in blue jerseys and not in the orange of Cleveland Browns. And I know how tough that is to go on the road and to win. Sometimes you can rationalize and say, okay, we're the Ravens. We're going out west. Yes, we're playing an NFC team. So ultimately, how bad is that one going to hurt us inside our division? Maybe not so much in the overall record. Yes, but then we get to come back home and really settle down into our AFC schedule. And if you let that sort of thinking, get to you, then the Seahawks would have gone back to Cleveland and laid an egg, but they didn't. And so I think John Harbaugh, your guys, Pat Moriarty, who is, your capologist back there in Baltimore.
No, Pat
is
well.
A former teammate of mine at Georgia Tech. He was a running back when I was a wide receiver and tight end.
I love Pat because on game days, he's in the press box, and it's kind of like when Fred and Barney were having a baby. He paces back and forth, I love Pat, man. And,
well, he's a great guy, and he's a really good friend, and I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to catch up a little bit. But, it's just the nature of people sometimes that there are going to be kind of letdowns. And so you've got guys in the organization like Pat, like John Harbaugh, like, your assistant coaches. Bobby Ingram is such a good friend, a dear friend. I love him like a brother and got to know him actually more like a father-son because I'm a lot older than he is. But, and with the passing of his daughter, it was just such a tragic thing. So there are a lot of great people in your organization that will keep everybody focused with their eye on the prize, that being, set aside the fact that CenturyLink Field is the loudest stadium in the world to play, that the Seahawks are unbelievably good at home, and that their fans help them to every single win, and that the Seahawks are on the ascent, that they're playing better on defense each week, their offense is already at a high level, and you've got an MVP candidate quarterback. Forget about all that and just come in and play your game. And we, on the other side, have to figure out how to stop a guy like Lamar Jackson because you only see his skill set once a season if you're playing anybody in this league.
Steve, I got a story for you on Pete Carroll. 20 years ago, I was syndicated at Sporting News Radio, 101 Sports out of Chicago. And for the 2 years we were there, it was sort of like during Pete's unemployment. He was sort of like, no, Jets, Patriots, sort of waiting it out. What's going to happen? Who knows? He did radio with me every week. So every Monday, Pete called in for 2 years. I found the tapes this summer because I've been doing this 29 years now. I went through all my old rock and roll tapes and all my Hall of Famers this summer with Messina going in the Hall and Ed Reed going in the Hall. So I found all these old Pete Carroll. And I listened to some of the conversations. I've only met Pete once in my life. I said hello to him very briefly at the Combine. I see him at the owners' meetings every year, but I leave him alone. And man, has he had an afterlife in all of this, right? Like where I found him, where he was the rock and roll young hipster head coach, communicating with the players, but probably couldn't communicate with the owners very well, and then goes off to college and becomes this legendary guy and builds this thing, then comes up to Seattle, come back to the league where not a lot of guys go in that direction when they're making $5, $6, $7, $8 million a year, and they got it good in the Pac-10, and they got a gig, and they can go to television, they can do a lot of different things. Man, he still runs around like he's like younger than me. Steve, I'm 51. I turned 51 this Monday, right? And I'm thinking, Pete's got to be 50. Pete's got to be 70, Like, I looked it up, and I'm like, and Pete's still doing it with this 18-year-old. He's really a special guy, and I don't know him at all, and I admire it from afar. And I really think it's cool that, like, my tapes with him turned out to be with a guy who's probably going to a Hall of Fame of some kind here soon, right? If he can do it again. And John Harbaugh, the same thing. Sort of, these really are special organizations in that way that they've built things that are sustainable beyond quarterbacks, beyond Earl Thomas, beyond Ray Lewis, beyond Ed Reed. There's something about it, and that 12th man that there's a long-term thing, and a lot of guys like Earl that are pissed off right now that are going to come back and realize they had a really good thing going on there back in one day. Right?
Yeah, and Earl will. I'm almost certain will end up in our Ring of Honor one day, and all will be forgotten. Remember, we had Kenny Easley, who went into the Hall of Fame last year, and Kenny, one of the greatest safeties to play this game. Unfortunately, his career ended early because of kidney disease, but he left here on terrible terms with the organization. And it took about 20 years for him to sort of kind of go. And Kenny was as headstrong, amazingly intelligent guy, very smart guy. And was just, he was not going to be have his mind changed. He was going to be ticked off at the organization forever. And finally, it was one of the longtime vice presidents of the Seahawks who got to him and said, "Listen, Kenny, we need to make this right. You need to come back into the fold." And sure enough, he ends up in the Ring of Honor and then in the Hall of Fame.
Hey, we put Brian Billick in a month ago, and
yeah.
That was a little frosty. And Brian's my business partner. Joined me on behalf of Living Classrooms. And Anquan Bolden went in this week, where that certainly didn't end well. I mean, his last play was a great, won the Super Bowl for us, and then he was shuttled off. So I mean, these guys get fired, and Earl Thomas. I mean, Steve Smith when he came here. Oh my God, right? I mean, it doesn't always end well, right? But in the end, it's special.
Coach, and no matter how much you've done for the organization, because certainly players, they don't want to leave. Very few players actually make that decision to say, you know what, I just know my body and it's time to step down.
Hey, by the way, Trent Dilfer doesn't come back here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, Trent's angry, and, that was his last play too. I mean, so it really is hard to keep it's impossible to keep everybody happy, right?
Well, yeah, you can't. And what you're hoping is that time will heal some of those wounds, and generally it does. We've got a litany of guys who are probably waiting to get into that Ring of Honor. You got a Sean Alexander, you got a Matthew Hasselbeck, Mike Holmgren, for heaven's sake.
Oh wow!
But I remember Mike when he first got here. He said the key is not for me to come in here and turn us into a winner next season. The key is for us to become a winner and stay competitive, not just with the teams in our division, but be competitive in the playoffs and competing for a spot in February every single year. Now, I know that's easy to say, but that's what he was building toward. Well, that's what Pete Carroll has achieved. And he, along with John, and I know Pete would always say this, he can't do anything without the players and without John Schneider. And Schneider and his guys are the ones who put those players there. Has every single one of them been a home run? Absolutely not. But boy, oh boy, who goes to the third round and finds the gem of Russell Wilson? Who finds a Doug Baldwin as a college free agent? Who finds a late-round draft choice in Richard Sherman and turns him into a perennial All-Pro? That's what Pete's job has been, and he's done it, I think, as well as anybody. I'm only a couple of years younger than Pete is. He just turned 68, so he is the youngest 68-year-old I think I have ever met. If I'm even close to moving around the way he does on the sidelines every Sunday, I'll be happy.
There's Shaquem Griffin, too. I haven't talked to everybody about it this week, but, I mean, you played, I've talked to some people about Jim Abbott being this thing. My dad grew up playing baseball with Pete Gray. Like, my dad was that old, would tell me the stories of the one-armed baseball player and all that. It's inspirational, it's incredible, and I know you've had a front-row seat to that, his brother, the whole deal. And, Pete and John are in on that, too, and that makes it even cooler, I think, right? And the kid can play.
Yeah, he can, and he's right now. He's a really key part of all of our special teams. I think he'll become even more a key part of some pass rush schemes that we do because he's so quick off the corner, and amazingly, he's a terrific tackler. And maybe the best thing about Shaquem is his effect on Shaquille. I mean, these two guys are twins. They're born 3 minutes apart. They're as close as any two people can be in life. And
even closer than John and Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, right. Well, to have those guys together in your franchise, and I know some people are going to say, well, you wouldn't have Shaquem if Shaquille was like 2 years older than him, or you probably wouldn't have said no. They took him because they thought he could play and add certainly to our special teams, and he has. But just the fact that those two guys are so good for each other. They make each other better, and the enthusiasm that they show. It's that kind of family sort of attitude that Pete fosters in the franchise, and those two guys are just a microcosm of that.
All right, dude, let's drop all this serious business here and get down to brass tacks. You play for Jack Patera. I'm a little younger than you. You know, I dropped some Burt Jones, but I was 9. I was at a Memorial Stadium for all that, but I was a big fan of Ken Patera. I mean, did Ken Patera ever come to practice with Jack? I mean, what was it like to have a head coach whose brother was wrestling in the WWF back in 1979, pinning Bob Backlund and Bruno Sammartino?
I never saw Ken, and as I remember, he died at a young age too, younger than you would expect of him to have passed. But Jack was a remarkable guy. And again, we talk about how you learn as you get older. I came to really appreciate Jack. He was a tough guy. He had a lot of rules. I mean, didn't have a lot of rules, but the ones he had were, we didn't have water at practice. I played for him for 6 seasons, went through 6 training camps in Cheney, Washington, where it's 100 degrees every day and it's drier than the desert, and we never had water at practice. But you learned how to manage. You learned how to hydrate, all those things. Jack was a veteran's coach, so once you got a little older, you loved playing for him, and after I was done, I found out what a great guy he really was, and what how funny he was, and all those things. So I miss that. He passed away a couple of years ago, now a year and a half ago, and we used to go up and see him at his house about an hour outside of Seattle, his cabin up in the mountains. He just a genuinely good guy, and I guess as flashy as his brother was as a wrestler, that's how kind of understated and almost solemn on the sidelines was Jack. But don't get him angry, because if he rips into you, you stay ripped into.
Well, it's always, as a kid, I would go down to the matches at the Baltimore Civic Center with my parents on Saturday nights once a month. Vince McMahon, the whole thing would come in, and my dad would always say, his brother's a coach, and I was such a big sports fan, knowing all that, but it was one of those weird pieces of trivia that when it showed up on your Wikipedia, I'm like, I got to ask Raible about that, So, hey, man, I appreciate you coming on. I know your time's valuable. Last thing, I'm coming to Seattle. Where am I going to dinner? We're going to the Who concert Saturday. Roger, Pete, and he's the other Pete. The other Pete Carroll. It's Pete Townsend, right?
Well, first of all, I hope it's a great show. Those guys are older than I am, so God bless them for being able to run around and jump around on stage for a couple hours and make everybody happy. Weather's going to be a little iffy. The roof will be closed for you at T-Mobile Park, so that's okay. You'll have a good time there. To eat, we have a place called the Metropolitan Steakhouse.
I've been there. Yeah, I know that.
I'm doing commercials here, and I shouldn't be, but that's a good one. Everybody has a Capitol Grill. Those are always great. So I think you'll. There's a wonderful French restaurant.
Oh, see,
and I can't remember its name right now.
You're gonna have to text that to me afterward. All right.
Oh God, it's a good one too, and I just can't remember the name of it.
We always love coming to Seattle, man. I found out about the MPOP Museum, and I've been up in the Space Needle. I'm just always trying to mix it up. I've never been out to Mount Rainier, but I don't have that kind of time. But I always admire it. But you got a beautiful place out there, Steve. I'm looking forward to getting out there. I appreciate you updating us on everything.
Nestor, my pleasure. Anytime. Have a great visit. Except don't win this weekend.
Oh man, don't do that to us before the bye, man. We got to sit on that, and then Tom Brady's coming. That would not be good. Hey, it's gonna be a great football game. We'll see you on Sunday. I'll be caffeinated. All right.
All right, partner. Thanks.
I hear they got coffee out there. Steve Raible joining us here. He is Raible, Raible, KIRO, KIRO 7, evening news anchor, former player. The other Steve, not named Largent. Most people ask Raible about, like, Largent or Zorn or Bruce Bhakti. I ask him about Jack Patera. I didn't even ask him about Jack. I asked him about Ken, even though he gave me some great Jack stories. You can find me if you give a Jack about all the things we're doing around here. I tell you what, the morning newspaper, getting bigger, better all the time, all the Baltimore positive stuff in there. All of it brought to you by our friends at Planet Fitness, planetfitness.com. You could sign up. It's always $5 down, $10 a month. We'll get you in shape. Got the pumpkin and gingerbread season around the corner, turkey season. My God, I'm 5 weeks away from stuffing my face with turkey. Planet Fitness, always there for you. Appreciate the Brick family and all that they do to support us. You can find me on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat and the buyatoyota.com Audio Vault, and in Seattle, and all of our awesome Baltimore Positive stuff coming next week. We are Baltimore Positive and WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.